Now this speech I wrote a couple weeks ago, so actually this is a little bit out of date. But even this week in Egypt, we're seeing the results of 30 years of a US-backed dictator there. When you wake up one day and discover that your government is not acting in your interest, but in the interest of some foreign power, you may have some resentment there. And for the US, we can't make up our minds right now whether protesters in Egypt are freedom fighters or terrorist insurgents, because Mubarak is our guy there. Now obviously I wrote this a couple weeks ago. We did find out whether the people there were terrorists or were they freedom fighters. We actually made that decision. Unfortunately, it's a bit awkward because we had to decide, because there was no way to really split hairs on it. We had to say, yes, they're freedom fighters. Unfortunately, we've given the guy $70 billion over the last 30 years. So, if they're freedom fighters and we gave that guy $70 billion, we start having to do the math. Now, there are those that say that we can't leave the Middle East because if we leave the Middle East, gas is going to become $7 a gallon. That's another argument that you hear. I don't know. Do you guys hear that kind of thing ever? Okay, if we leave the Middle East, gas is going to become $7 a gallon. So my question to you is, how much is gas costing you right now if you include war as a subsidy? If you include our foreign policy as a subsidy, what does gas cost you? Well, 138 billion gallons of gasoline consumed in 2009, $1 trillion a year for our foreign policy. So if you divide that out, that comes to $7.25 a gallon for our foreign policy alone. Well, then if you add the cost of gasoline, which is $3 a gallon, to that, you get $10.25 a gallon. I'd like to take just a quick second here to go off script to say, when people talk about the green movement, the argument they always hear about green energy resources, now I am a free market guy. I believe that the free market should move in and handle energy completely. We don't have that. But I believe that we should. But the reason that a lot of people believe that these green energy sources aren't good, the reason that they attack them, is because they say they don't give us the bang for the buck that oil does when gas costs $3.25 a gallon. I'd like to see the Austrian school evaluate, well, what's the difference if gas actually costs $10.25 a gallon, because that's what it really costs when you add in our foreign policy. So the other thing that's the worst about this is we're spending everything we're doing is maintaining a distribution monopoly on the world's resources, and nothing we're doing is protecting the country. But it's worse than that. And just like I said, we're not fighting for the rights of the people in these countries. It's a distribution monopoly that we're fighting for. We're not even fighting for the rights to get their resources for free, which I wouldn't be for. But what we're doing is crazier. We are fighting, dying, and going broke to give someone else the right to sell us something we could get without fighting and dying and going broke. So ideas like Cato Institute put out a report that said basically if we wanted low-priced oil and less terrorism, the key would be to leave the Middle East. Because right now we've got the war and we're giving all the profits to BP when we could just say, okay, BP, you're on your own, or who's ever on their own, and you're going to have them sell us oil directly. Well, if we don't get involved, then some of these countries will become these giant super states that will come and kill us. Well, and we've already explained how big our military is. If they became a super state, that would actually be beneficial, so there would be a target. There's no target in terrorism. There's no anything like that. So we've got this whole, but they won't become super states, just like North Korea. North Korea is a paper tiger. The thing is that autocratic and socialist regimes do not work. We have nothing to fear from their leaders because their countries will be a theocracy or a dictatorship. And their suppression of the people and plundering of their own resources will prevent them from economic success, and that's what they would need to threaten us. They cannot survive in the real world, and the people of these countries will inevitably revolt, especially if they see us as a shining light on the hill, the example of liberty to emulate. If our citizens want to extend their hands or wallets in assistance to other countries, they should, but our government needs to stay out of it. Because like everything else that governments do, it ends up as a giant scheme to funnel taxpayer money into the coffers of the rich, corporately connected friends. Now this policy has a way of enraging people from around the world, which I imagine must all be part of our war for terror.